Hi there, and welcome to the Alberta Update. A look at what's happening in your province. We will chat with the Premier about standing up to the federal government on energy and on pension talks. Health Minister Adriana LaGrange will join us to talk about important changes coming to the health system and what this means to you and your family. Environment Minister Rebecca Schulz will also join us to talk about a major investment in clean tech and the ongoing battle with Ottawa and the feds about energy and the environment, all that and much more coming up on the Alberta Update. I am your host, Bruce McAllister. Thank you for joining us today. But first, let's have the Premier join us. She released a letter in response to a letter released by the Prime Minister when it comes to conversations being had here in Alberta over the Alberta pension plan. As you know, Alberta has released the finding of a report looking into the APP and what it would mean for Alberta. That report suggesting Alberta seniors could take home more money or more dollars could be left in the pockets of Albertans and entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, we know, as we see the Premier, that this decision will be made by Albertans. Premier, thanks for taking some time to talk about this issue. Let's dive right in. Ottawa appears to be publicly injecting itself into this debate. What are your thoughts on the open letter that was sent out from Ottawa?
I sure didn't like the tone. I mean, one of the things that the Prime Minister has to accept is that the Constitution matters. We just saw a Supreme Court judgment that proved that. And one of the things that we're allowed to do under the Constitution is to have our own pension plan at the provincial level. We've agreed to be part of the Canada Pension Plan, and but we also have a provision in that act about how you might be able to leave it and to establish your own plan. That was what we feel we heard from Albertans when we had the Fair Deal panel. 350,000 Albertans participated. They said, hey, take a look at this. And if you think there's something there, let's put it to a referendum. So we're keeping that commitment. We put the reports out. We're having the debate and the discussion, the consultation. And he injected himself in to almost threaten us that we wouldn't be allowed to do any changes. And that's just not how our country works. I didn't like his tone. I think that in point of fact, the Ontario finance minister approached it far better. He asked for a meeting of the finance ministers with Nate Horner, and Nate Horner responded saying, "Sure, you bet, come to Calgary. We'd be happy to have the next finance ministers meeting here." And that's the way we're supposed to discuss things. That's what cooperative federalism actually looks like.
Ottawa sure doesn't seem to want to stay in its lane, Premier. And the answer to this may be pretty self-explanatory, but I'd like to get your thoughts. Why is it important that it does stay in its lane, not just on this issue, but on provincial jurisdiction as a whole?
Well, because they don't have not only is it that they don't have the authority, they actually don't have the competence to be legislating in areas outside of their jurisdiction. If you run for provincial office, it's because you care about the issues that are our constitutional jurisdiction: healthcare, education, advanced education, seniors care for our most vulnerable, managing relationships with municipalities. Those are all things that anyone who's run for provincial office cares deeply about, thinks about, and we have competence in. They don't have competence in that at the federal level. All the federal level has been able to do is offer funding arrangements, and what they do is they dangle a little bit of dollars, and then with a small amount of money, they want to control 100% of the decisions in
Mhm.
each one of those areas. And in the past, I think we've had some cooperation that has worked reasonably well, but they've had massive overreach in every single area of our jurisdiction. We've had enough. We recruited a bunch of other provinces who have also had enough. The business community's had enough. First Nations who intervened with us have had enough. And now the Supreme Court has validated our view, which is that the Constitution matters and the feds have to stay in their own lane.
Well, let's follow up on that. The Supreme Court ruling, as you just alluded to, Bill C-69 was, they ruled in Alberta's favor. This was known as the No More Pipelines Act. I think it was former Premier Jason Kenney that labeled it that. You call it something else, but what does this mean for Alberta, this ruling?
Well, I called it the Never Build Anything Anywhere Act because
Right.
as frustrating as it has been to watch the federal government blow immense opportunities to build new pipelines, whether it was Northern Gateway, Keystone XL, Energy East, it's what they wanted to do is bring their process for environmental approval onto every major industrial project taking place within Alberta's borders that we historically have been responsible for doing our own assessment over. That's why I called it the Never Build Anything Anywhere Act, because we had to get their permission to build, an extra 75 kilometers of road or brand new power station or anything that they deem to be an industrial project of their interest, we would be tied up for not just years, what we've seen in the past decades in a process that we couldn't see the finish line on. So, what this does is it asserts that provinces have the right to make decisions on major industrial projects within their own boundaries. And we're going to make sure that everybody knows that we're open for business, that we have robust environmental approval processes, and we're going to make sure that people know when they get a yes from us, they can go ahead.
And we'll have Environment Minister Rebecca Schulz on in a few minutes. We'll talk a little bit more about this. Listen, before I let you go, let's switch gears for a second. Session is coming up quick, and the speech from the throne is next week. What do you want Albertans to know about things as the MLAs head back to Edmonton?
Well, I want people to understand that we've got our groove back. We had many years from about 2008 onwards where things were bumpy, very bumpy after 2014. Then, of course, the pandemic, and we emerged from that stronger than ever. We have more people coming into our province year over year than we have since 1981. And what we have to do is embrace that, welcome that. People want to be part of what's going on here. And what that means is that as government, we've got to work on managing those growth pressures. If new communities need to be built, we have to support them with schools and hospitals and roads. We've got to hire more nurses, teachers, doctors. And we want people to embrace this vision of being not only dominant as an economic power, but also with the population growth becoming more and more dominant in the political discussion nationally. And so you'll see a lot of that coming through in the Vision for the Throne speech and all of the pieces that are associated with that. That's one part. The other part is we are not going to get our budget under control unless we get our healthcare under control. It has been increasing at well above the rate of inflation and population growth for years and years, and underperforming relative to other jurisdictions. So we've already begun the process of making changes there, with the announcement last week that we're going to be rewarding doctors with more dollars as they add more patients, allowing nurse practitioners to set up their own private practices. That's going to help us out on primary care. We've already built out a robust recovery-oriented system of care on mental health and addiction. Next big issue to tackle will be the decentralization of Alberta Health Services. So there'll be more. You'll hear more about that in the coming few weeks.
Look forward to it. And Premier, as always, thanks for your time, and we'll see you soon.
Yep, my pleasure. Talk to you soon, Bruce.
All right. There's Premier Danielle Smith, and the Premier talking about some of the healthcare changes coming. Alberta's government taking some big steps to address staffing changes in the healthcare system. An $11 million investment will allow more internationally trained nurses to complete the programs they need to get certified to work in Alberta's healthcare system. Advanced Education Minister Rajan Sawhney made that announcement at the University of Lethbridge. The minister highlighting that this will help create over 1,100 new seats for registered and practical nurses in Alberta.
One of the issues crucially important to Albertans today, and one that will continue to be important into the future, is healthcare. Across Canada and around the world, there is a high demand for the essential skills and expertise of nurses. That's why Alberta's government is investing in programs to increase the number of nurses in our province.
And building off that, Health Minister Adriana LaGrange just announced the next steps for Alberta's healthcare action plan, which includes modernizing Alberta's primary care system, also known as MAPS. And Health Minister Adriana LaGrange joins us now more to talk about it. Good day, Minister.
Good day, Bruce. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Hey, the goal of MAPS, I know it's a big initiative for you and your department, is to strengthen primary care. There are many Albertans we know struggling to find a family doctor or primary care provider at all right now. How is this intended to help?
So this is intended to really lay a strong foundation for primary care right across the whole province. We know that there are people struggling to find, as you say, family practitioners and primary care providers. And if they even have a family doctor or primary care provider, sometimes it's taking them quite a while to get in to see them. We need to fix that. We need to do better. And so this MAPS, the modernizing of Alberta's primary care system, really looks to strengthen a foundation, set primary care is the foundation to keep people well, keep them out of the hospital. That will alleviate some of the strain on our hospital. What we're looking to do is there was a huge engagement that took place right across the whole province. It had a panel plus an Indigenous panel, and it also had experts from around the globe that provided input into that. And they provided us recommendations. So now we're going to act on those recommendations. We have a great framework. We're going to act on the recommendations. We announced a few little initial steps. And again, I want to say they're initial steps to strengthen the primary care system by really looking at the scope of practice for nurse practitioners is one of the steps. And so a nurse practitioner now will be able to see their own patients and be able to have a panel of patients. So that's something new. There will be a new funding model for nurse practitioners as well. We're adding additional dollars for family practitioners that are already seeing panels. That's part of a $57 million over 2.5-year initiative. We know this is a first step to really provide those individuals with additional dollars because we know that there's a lot of administrative burden that they're going through. We have made numerous announcements on dealing with Indigenous racism, setting up an innovation fund for Indigenous healthcare, primary care. So there's just a number of things that we brought forward. But again, these are first steps leading to larger steps. And I guess the one item that I really want to highlight is we are setting up a task force. And the task force on primary care will be working to come up with a new funding model and also how we can further implement the other recommendations that are in the reports.
Wonderful. Look, lots of ground covered there in that answer. Appreciate all those details. Let's follow up on the nurse practitioners a bit. I know your government's been working hard to provide more access. The new details and what you're allowing and what you're allowing nurse practitioners to do, setting up their own clinics, et cetera, should definitely take some of the strain off the primary care network. I assume that's the goal here.
That is absolutely the goal. We know that nurse practitioners, are highly trained, skilled individuals. They are able to do pretty well everything a physician can do, a family physician can do, minus the surgery. And so we want to make sure that we're able to utilize them to their full scope of practice, that they're able to open a clinic, that they're able to, some are already involved in primary care networks, that they will be able to bring their expertise and then have their own set of patients that they can look after. We call them panels of patients. So they'll be able to have their own panels. So again, looking at a new way of funding nurse practitioners so that they can do what they do best and provide excellent care across this province.
Look, so much going on in your ministry here in Alberta for sure, and we appreciate you taking some time to join us and give us a little update today. Keep up the good work, Minister. Thank you as always for your time.
Well, I appreciate that. Can I give you one more little tidbit of great news that we just signed a memorandum of understanding with the Alberta Medical Association? And so this is historic. We're rebuilding that relationship with the Alberta Medical Association. So the president and I signed an MOU stating that we are going to work on finding a new funding model for our family practitioners so that they can provide really good quality, longitudinal, comprehensive care, primary care. So this is new right off the presses. I just signed it the other day with Dr. Paul Parks, and just so pleased that we're able to collaborate together for the benefit of Albertans.
Listen, it's terrific news. I should have thought to ask you about it, but thanks for checking me and making sure that we covered it. Appreciate it again, Minister. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Bruce.
All right, there's Health Minister Adriana LaGrange joining us on the Alberta Update. And the Premier had the opportunity to speak recently about investment in Alberta's energy industry and the importance of Alberta's world-leading technology development around carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Here's a look at what the Premier had to say.
Alberta will remain a major provider of reliable, affordable, sustainable energy while reducing its impact on the planet, because emissions are a challenge to overcome, not a barrier to expansion. In fact, we're moving decisively forward, as I mentioned, with carbon neutral status by 2050. As producers drill new wells, investments in cutting edge technology, especially carbon capture, utilization, and storage, will keep driving progress on emissions. Alberta already is a global leader in the CCUS field, and our goal is to strengthen that position. There's never been a better time to invest in Alberta's energy industry. Production is climbing to match demand. The range of available energy resources is expanding. Government is partnering with industry to help defray the costs of tech development, speed up deployment, and when we need to, de-risk investment. And we were also working hard to trim the regulatory excess that delays projects and adds costs. This is a government that is willing to fight for what it believes in, and I look forward to hearing from many of you and to working with all of you to build that future.
Well, speaking of standing up for Alberta's autonomy, Environment Minister Rebecca Schulz released an open letter to Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault. This coming after the federal government swore to continue its crusade against energy-producing provinces, despite a Supreme Court ruling striking down Bill C-69, the so-called No More Pipelines Act. We just chatted with the Premier about that. Minister Schulz joins us now to talk more about the message that she is sending to Ottawa. Good day, Minister.
Hi, Bruce.
You know, in your letter, Minister, you highlighted the need to put common sense before political ideology. Why was that such an important thing to note?
You know, because we continue to see this federal government roll out regulations and plans that are not based in data or reality. So the clean electricity regulations being one of them. Obviously, this is an area of provincial jurisdiction for a reason. You know, as Premier said, we each as provinces have unique electricity grids. We know how to manage this. And then the federal government comes in with plans that are completely unreasonable, will cost, some estimates have that at over $1 trillion. And it shows a complete disregard for common sense and really the things that matter most for everyday people, which is affordability and reliability. And, I think what we just see is it's all driven by ideology. What we're asking is put politics aside. Let's make sure that people have access to affordable, reliable energy. And of course, let's work to reducing emissions at the same time, but do it in a way that doesn't put people's day-to-day lives at risk.
You know, I think your message is resonating. Case in point, talk about what's happening around the world when it comes to balancing the environment and ensuring people are able to keep the lights on.
That's exactly what we're advocating for, is a reasonable approach. I mean, what we've seen in other places around the world, people often look to Germany or California or Texas, where they have gone so far, so fast. And now we see some of these countries, like Germany, for example, refiring up coal-fired generation for electricity. And so, this is the problem. We've seen it in other places. We've seen what happens when grid reliability is at risk. That means that people are rationing power. I often say, look, for an everyday family, you look at a place like California where they might be rationing power between the hours of 4 and 9 p.m. That is homework. That is school pickup. That is kids' activities. That is dinner, all in the dark. That is really what's at risk here when we talk about a reliable grid. We can look to what's happening in those jurisdictions, what's happened to their economies. I think, one could look at Germany. They have one of the worst performing economies right now, and it's expected to shrink this year. We don't want to see that here in Alberta. We are not willing to put people's jobs and livelihoods and, again, the reliability of their power grid at risk. And that's exactly why we're asking for that common sense approach.
Well, let's talk about the financial side of this a little bit. Anybody watching right now can relate. Look, the price of groceries is skyrocketing. National inflation is a huge issue. What kind of numbers are we talking about when the federal government says net zero by 2035? What does that mean for Albertans, and maybe not just Albertans, but for Canadians?
Yeah, and it's a good question. And part of it, why it's so hard to get an actual cost estimate, is because what the federal government is going to require in terms of technology doesn't even exist. So a lot of times these are kind of best estimates, but we have 2 different studies that would suggest that this would cost well over $1 trillion. And so you look at the cost of that, who's going to pay for that? Albertans, Canadians, either on their taxes or on their bills. And, I think when we look here at Alberta, we've already reduced emissions in electricity by 53%. Part of that is moving away from coal-fired generation. Now, here's the thing. We have to be honest with Albertans and Canadians about what that costs. Right now, and for the next number of years, we will still continue to pay $100 million a year for that transition. So those are dollars that aren't going to healthcare, aren't going to education, aren't going to help support affordability concerns or utility bills for everyday people who are struggling. And, again, this is where the federal government, they just completely disregard that. You mentioned groceries, Bruce. Yesterday, I was at an event with Minister Freeland, and she was asked about the rising cost of living. And they said, well, we provided a grocery rebate. Sure, but you also introduced a carbon tax. And that carbon tax is making every aspect of our day-to-day lives more expensive. And so, again, it comes back to reasonableness, because affordability is now one of the top issues for Canadians right across our country. And, at some point, I think our plan to look at carbon neutrality by 2050 is far more reasonable and, would still get us to a place where we're reducing emissions, but still make sure that energy is affordable and reliable.
Look, the Premier spoke to Bill C-69, and of course, the Supreme Court ruling in Alberta's favor. What kind of impact from your perspective do you think that'll have on Alberta?
I think that has a huge impact. And as the Premier said, it really did identify that areas of electricity generation and energy development are solely and constitutionally the responsibility of the provinces. I'm a little concerned that the federal government seems to disregard what we saw in that decision. When we look at Bill C-69, it hurt our economy. It was wildly unconstitutional. It scared off projects and investments right across the country that would create jobs. Specifically in Alberta, we certainly saw that. And so our message to the federal government is that they cannot continue to do that and continue to act unconstitutionally. I would say, that decision, it did give me hope that we can be a leader again. We can build big projects and get things done and continue to create jobs and drive our economy. But it does, I think, impact what the federal government wants to do when it comes to whether it's clean electricity or the emissions cap that they've been talking about. I think that this, again, strengthens our position that these are areas of provincial jurisdiction, and we want the federal government to stay out.
One more before I let you go. You recently announced $40 million for small and medium-sized businesses to find new ways to lower emissions, also reduce energy costs, and grow the economy. Touch on that before we let you go today.
Yeah, that was an exciting announcement just a couple days ago that we did in partnership with Emissions Reduction Alberta. So we have our Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Fund. It's a levy on heavy emitters. Those dollars go back into innovation and technology. What we're seeing, small and medium-sized businesses don't always have the access to capital to really get their ideas off the ground. And so this $40 million competition is open right now. Again, for small and medium-sized businesses, that's businesses up to about 500 people. Those businesses, small businesses, make up over 95% of Alberta's economy. And so when we talk about the innovators and the risk takers that built our province and set us up to be an energy powerhouse over the last number of decades, it's that exact innovation that we want to encourage right now. And that will make sure that we can continue to be a leader for generations to come. So we're excited to see what comes in on that one, and very exciting time here in Alberta.
It's great to see Alberta leading the way on these things, despite the very antagonistic approach of the federal government. Minister, thanks for your work. Thanks for taking some time to talk to us today.
Thanks so much, Bruce.
Environment Minister Rebecca Schulz joining us on the Alberta Update today. Well, Alberta's government recently released a report that took a look at what a possible Alberta pension plan could mean for the province and its people. You're probably talking about it around the dinner table, around coffee shops. So many people are. The report suggests it could mean higher benefits for seniors, lower premiums as well, and more money in the pockets of Albertans. Here is what you should know about the potential impact of an Alberta pension plan.
Alberta's government is exploring a new possibility, an Alberta pension plan, or APP for short. You might be wondering, what's in it for you? You see, in 2020, Alberta's government commissioned LifeWorks, an an independent third-party consultant to review the potential for an Alberta pension plan. Their analysis found many benefits for Albertans. That's because Alberta's young working population and more jobs with higher wages has resulted in Albertans over-contributing tens of billions into the CPP compared to the benefits we've received. This means that Albertans could save over $5 billion in just the first year if we moved from the CPP to an Alberta pension plan. These savings could increase each senior's monthly pension payment, or even provide a large bonus payment for seniors at retirement. Or these savings could be used to save Alberta workers up to $1,425 in payroll deductions every year. And if you're a business owner, small, medium, or large, an APP could reduce the premiums you pay each year by up to $1,425 per employee. Along with more money in your pocket, an APP would be more stable than the current CPP. An asset transfer of over $300 billion from the CPP to an APP would mean a more secure pension for Albertans. And agreements would be developed to allow Albertans to move throughout Canada without impacting their pension benefits. To be clear, there will be no move to an Alberta pension plan unless Albertans approve it in a referendum. It's your pension, your choice. So learn more and have your say at albertapensionplan.ca.
Well, public safety has been a key initiative of this government. Obviously, the Premier has focused on it. The Deputy Premier, Mike Ellis, has been working very hard to try and give officers the resources that they need to deal with the growing crime rates in Alberta. And part of that has been trying to make our sea trains, our railways safer. And earlier this week, I spent some time with the minister riding the rails in Calgary, and we had a little conversation about some of the work the government is doing. And here's a look at that now. Minister, thanks for having a conversation here right in the heart of where some of the big issues are for you. You look around this train, it's packed. It's over the noon hour here on a weekday. This is priority for you and your government, public safety. Comment maybe on the steps you've taken, the things that we've done to improve safety in the Corps.
Well, thanks very much, Bruce. I can tell you that public safety is not only a priority for me, but certainly a priority for the Premier, and we've made that perfectly clear, really ever since I've taken over this particular role. As you can see, there's so many people that are riding the trains, the old cop in me can see some things that are a bit of concern, but for the most part, we have good citizens who just want to be safe and take the train from point A to point B. So this is why, we, had the pilot projects of having the additional sheriffs both in Calgary and Edmonton, although in Calgary, of course, they put a bit of a pause on that. But that being said, one of the things I will say is officer presence matters. And, nothing can be more of an example of that than what I saw, quite frankly, up in the Edmonton area. Although somewhat anecdotal, I'm starting to hear that people are tending to feel a little bit more safe, and because they are seeing those officers really commuting with passengers and offering that officer presence.
It's interesting walking around with you. You can tell you're a former officer, the things that you see, the things that stand out to you. Look, ordinary citizens, as I said earlier, just want to feel safe. Can you comment maybe on, the significant difference that you're seeing in some of the pilot projects that you've implemented, some of the resources that you've committed, and that officer presence?
When I was policing a long time ago, stranger and stranger crime was actually pretty rare, and I would say that law enforcement, the chiefs of police would get on the news if there was a violent crime, and they would say, the offender was known to the victim, and that kind of put everybody's mind at ease that they weren't going to be a victim of a random act of violence. But the reality is some of the statistics that I've seen in Edmonton that have been told me by the chief of police up at Edmonton, and I can only assume might be consistent with here in Calgary, but it's disproportionate. And I've heard about the number, like 70% of crimes that were occurring on the train system in Edmonton are stranger on stranger crime. So that means that you're running the risk, riding this train. All these good people are on this train right now, right? There is a higher chance of getting violently assaulted than years ago.
Fair. Look, the federal government has a role in this, and I know bail reform and some of the bills that have come across federally have been an issue for us, for your government.
Yeah.
Maybe comment on that, and how we work around it, how you resource our personnel to deal with this.
Prior to 2019, we had a judicial administrative process. It was called the bail hearing process, and people were either released or detained on what is known as primary, secondary, and tertiary grounds. The federal government, in the coalition between the Liberals and the NDPs, essentially broke that under Bill C-75. So since 2019, not just in Alberta, but right throughout Canada, you saw an acceleration of violent crimes occurring on places like this, on LRT trains, in cores of both Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, Montreal, right across Canada. And people that would have been detained prior to 2019 were being released into the communities. And this is where we saw the violent repeat criminal offenders causing the havoc that they're having. So what have we done? Look, we can't wait for the federal government to figure out what they're doing with C-48, and I can get into that if you like. But the reality is we have to make sure citizens feel safe. So this is why I had a very clear message to law enforcement. I said, if somebody is committing a crime, arrest them. If the system chooses to let that person out and they wish to commit another crime, arrest them again. And keep arresting them if they keep committing crimes up until the point where they either leave the province or, quite frankly, they stop committing crime. It's as simple as that.
I'll ask you one more. What would your message be, I guess, to those that ride the rails here? We're in Calgary today, but Edmonton, the big cities that obviously safety is a big priority for them. Your message to them and your government's commitment to making sure that they're safe.
Look, you have a right to feel safe in this community. You have a right to feel safe in Alberta. You have a right not to get randomly assaulted. You have a right not to get randomly stabbed. You have a right not to inhale secondhand crystal meth smoke. And you as a citizen have a right to feel safe in the city. And I will tell you this government, especially under the leadership of Premier Smith, myself, all ministers, all MLAs, we are committed to making sure that we keep these streets safe for the people of Calgary, for the people of Edmonton, for the people of Alberta, while also compassionately making sure that we take care of people who are in vulnerable states who might need that compassion, where they might need mental health or addictions issues as well.
Well, you're clearly having an impact and making a difference. Deputy Premier, Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Mike Ellis, thank you for taking some time to visit with us today.
Thanks, Bruce.
The governments of Alberta and Canada are providing $165 million to support livestock producers affected by drought and extreme growing conditions. It has been a tough growing season, of course, for farmers and ranchers as they face a lot of challenges due to dry conditions, which are driving up costs as well for producers. Minister of Agriculture R.J. Sigurdsson wants producers to know Alberta's government has their back.
Alberta's producers are vital to our province's economy. This drought relief initiative will help take some of the pressure off and support producers to protect their livelihoods while they continue to put food on the tables around this world.
Well, there's a growing need for emergency shelter space to meet the needs of women experiencing homelessness in the province and certainly in Calgary. Alberta's government is investing 40 new year-round shelter spaces, which will be available immediately. Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services Jason Nixon was in Calgary recently to make that announcement.
We have challenged organizations like the Mustard Seed to come up with unique ways of providing shelter, particularly for Indigenous peoples and for women. And today I'm excited to announce with the Mustard Seed that today they will open up, funded by the province of Alberta, 40 women-only emergency shelter spaces inside our province, which I am very excited about.
Alberta's government is investing more than, nearly $24 million in new supports for foster caregivers and other measures to improve stability for young people in care. Through this program, Caregivers will be able to access counseling services to support their own mental health and their families. There will also be additional supports available to better care for young adults in the transition to adulthood program.
I know that there is still work ahead. For now, I hope these initiatives, representing a combined investment of more than $23.6 million, will get us closer to a system where caregivers feel supported and where children and youth in care can experience stability, safety, and belonging.
The dedicated work of a caregiver doesn't just stop because a youth turns 18, and this funding will support foster families staying together while these young adults take steps to achieve independence.
Alberta government is also introducing a referral program in the hopes of increasing the number of foster families in the province. Well, the harvest is all but done. We certainly know that looking outside at the weather we've had over the last week or so. Agriculture Minister R.J. Segerson says 99% of crops have been harvested. Some of those crops, namely barley, play a special role in Alberta's craft beer industry. Let's take a look at how Alberta's producers play a part.
I'm R.J. Segerson, Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation. From October 13th to 21st, the Alberta Small Brewers Association is celebrating Alberta Beer Week. Today, Alberta is home to about 140 craft beer breweries, more than twice the number we had in 2018. And these breweries have become destinations for tourism and community building in every corner of our province, from small towns to our major cities. I had the opportunity to tour Hard Knocks Brewery in Diamond Valley, Alberta, to learn more about how Alberta's agricultural producers and processors support our province's thriving craft beer sector.
We opened up in 2019, kind of during the first kind of wave of all these craft breweries showing up in the province. Since we've seen this, we've seen actually the market itself actually kind of like explode. And the nice thing about being in the province of Alberta, we have the ability to use some of the best locally sourced grains that Alberta grows. So it's kind of like almost the best place to be if you want to open up a craft brewery.
I think the community of Alberta is starting to grasp the whole concept of craft beer. We have guest books that everyone signs, and I don't know how many pages in them, but typical guest book, and we're up to guest book number 10 of people from around the world.
We process here about 180,000 tons of barley a year, which, if people want to know, is around 7.5 to 8 million bushels, or if you really want to get down to it, is about 5,000 B trains of barley a year come through this plant. Our malting supplies over 700 breweries nationwide. In Alberta, we're supplying about 120 at the moment.
Our prairies are home to some of the world's finest barley. On average, Alberta yields almost 4.5 million tons of barley each year, more than half of Canada's overall production. About 20% of this barley goes to facilities like raw malting to be transformed into a foundational flavor ingredient for every glass of cold Alberta beer.
Growers in Alberta, farmers in Alberta provide some of the best barley in the world, and to see that come into local beers, I think is just exciting, and it's a great industry to be in.
Small breweries also enrich Alberta's economy, with $932 million in local beer sales in 2022. And according to the Alberta Small Brewers Association, the craft beer industry has created more than 1,000 jobs. I encourage Albertans to tap into local beer this week by visiting a brewery, tap room, farmer's market, or liquor store. Happy Alberta Beer Week.
And that does it for the Alberta Update. A look at what's happening in your province, and we certainly appreciate you joining us. We plan to do these updates weekly when the legislature sits, and of course that is coming right up every other week when it is not. You can always view the Alberta Update on the Your Alberta YouTube page or the Premier's at AB Danielle Smith YouTube page, and make sure to subscribe to the Alberta Update on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com or open the app, search Your Alberta again, or AB Danielle Smith, and hit the subscribe button. And we always appreciate you sharing some time with us. Thanks for being with us today, and we will see you again next time on the Alberta Update.